This podcast is brought to you by the Islamic Center and NYU. For more information, visit our website at www.icnyu.org.
Bismillahi walhamdulillah wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum everyone, welcome, and assalamu alaikum to those who are joining us online. So this is the first, I was going to say episode, this is the first session for these weekly halakas with me. Inshallah, I hope to share topics with you that can empower you not only spiritually, but also mentally and emotionally as well. So the topic I chose for today is, the gift of presence, and how the importance of being present and reigniting our mental and emotional and also spiritual connection to being present. Because I know that's like a thing that we all say, right? Like, be present. It's important to be present. I'm sure mindfulness, I'm sure we all hear that. We all know how important it is, but it's important to take time to really, on an individual level, reignite that connection so that we can apply it in our day-to-day lives. So let me just check and make sure everyone hears me online here. So what does it mean to be present first, right? When you think of presence, what do you think of? When someone says to be present or be present, what do you think of? Paying attention. Okay. Engaging. Eye contact. When you're present with someone, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's all those things. It's to be in the here and now, right? It's to be in this very moment that is a reality right in front of you. It's to realize the significance of that moment, that there is no greater moment than the moment right in front of me. That's how we really value presence. If you don't really see value in the moment that you're existing in right now, you won't really feel the need to be present. You're going to be everywhere but here in the here and now. You're going to go back to the past, dwell there. You're going to go to the future, dwell there. But this moment, you're going to be like, oh, it's not that important, right? But to be present, it means to be in the here and now. It's for our mind to not be engaging in thoughts that keep us from what is in front of us. So that's the building the muscle. And I use this concept a lot in my work, is the word muscle, because I believe just as we have physical muscles, we have spiritual muscles, mental and emotional muscles that we have to keep building, that are not easy in the beginning, but the more we cultivate them, the more we work on them, the easier they're going to get. And so to be present is for us to cultivate this muscle of bringing our mind back to the here and now constantly. It's like, oh, I noticed it going to the future, bring it back. I noticed it dwelling in the past, bring it back, right? It's to see the value of now and to prioritize the reality of what exists right in front of us over what has passed or what is to come. That's what being present is about. That's what valuing presence is about. So one of the things that is really important is for us to look at the present as a sacred space. And it is a sacred space because it's the only space where you can connect to anything, right? Because it's the only reality. The future is an illusion. It does not yet exist. And the past has passed, right? It's not a reality anymore. So the present is the most sacred space that you can exist in. It's the only space where you can connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your creator. It's the only space where you can connect to yourself and really pay attention to what your mind, your thoughts, your emotions, your body's telling you, right? It's the only space where you can connect to the hearts of others. And so this space is sacred. And there are many negative impacts of not being present. When you're not present, you deprive yourself of nourishment. Right? Because we as human beings, we're creatures of connection. We derive nourishment on a spiritual, mental, and emotional level when we connect. Now, in this world we live in, the problem is that what's being promoted is the illusion of connecting, not actual connection. Meaning that a lot of people are feeling connected, right? Through social media, just this online world. But not a lot of people are actually experiencing connection. There's a big difference. You can be connected with someone, right? Verbally talking, whatever, but you don't really experience connection. Connection produces nourishment. It allows you to walk away and feel like, wow, my heart got something out of this. And that's the thing about presence and why it translates into real connection, is because the only way that your heart can experience nourishment is if the mind is there to serve it. If your mind is in the future or in the past, your heart is like, where can I get the knowledge I need? Where can I get the reflection I need to be awakened, right? This is why in the Quran, we're taught to reflect a lot, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala constantly says, for those who reflect, right? Because when you use your mind and you're reflecting about what's happening right in front of you, when you're using your mind to think about what is right in front of you, your heart is nourished by that, right? Your heart is awakened by that knowledge. You know, like even if you like in mindfulness exercises, we can start out by telling clients to just to connect to the physical things that are present around them. Like it could be, you know, the fact that it's sunny outside. It could be that they feel the wind. It could be that they hear a noise, like out traffic, right? And so just by doing that, the heart is now able to connect. But when every time you're in the future, in the past, your heart is like left like, hello, you know, I have nothing to work with here. I have nothing to feed me. I have nothing to, it's the same thing as if you're talking to someone else. If you're sitting and talking to a loved one and you're like looking over there, looking over here, you're not engaged, your mind is wandering. Does the heart in front of you feel nourished by that connection? They're going to be like, hello, right? You're not paying attention. I don't feel like I'm really connecting with you. And so we do this with ourselves. And so there's a huge negative impact of not being present. And again, there are many factors that play a role to this. There's our phones, social media, right? All these things that take us away, you know, rob us of moments of our day where we can be present with the reality that exists right in front of us. So there's a malnourishment that happens spiritually, mentally, emotionally. There's a deprivation of our souls because the soul needs fuel, right? And we're not feeding it well when we do that. Another negative impact is the scattered mind, which is happening so much today. I cannot begin to tell you how many people will say, I feel like I'm scattered. I feel like I'm in a million different places. And by the time I go to bed at night, I'm like, what did I do today? And all that is mental and emotional energy that is being drained constantly, right? When you're not present, you know what you're doing? You're saying, that's a priority, that's a priority, that's a priority, that's a priority. What's going to happen in the next moment is a priority. What's going to happen in the next, hour is a priority. What's going to happen in the next day is a priority, but this is not a priority. So what happens is that it creates greater responsibility for things that are not in your control. You're like now added onto your plate all these things you're responsible for that have not even yet existed, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say you're responsible for. But you're like, I'll take responsibility for that. And yet the present, which is the only thing that he can really hold you accountable for, the only thing that he has placed in your power, the only thing that he has placed in your reality, you're saying, oh, nah, forget that, right? And if you look at it, this is why I really believe, like when people say, the verse where we know in Surah Al-Baqarah, where we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not burden a soul more than it can bear. We have to ask ourselves, what are we adding onto the equation that's making the test or whatever we're going through feel like we can't bear it? Because Allah only asked you to be accountable for what he put right in front of you. He does not ask you to be accountable for tomorrow, but we take that on, right? So a scattered mind is a huge thing. And what happens when the mind is scattered? You deplete your energy. You're spending your energy on so many different things. And a lot of times not the things that actually matter. I'm sure you guys have experienced days where you found yourself the whole day thinking about something, right? And just thinking about it over and over. By the end of the day, you're like, what did I do today? I didn't get this done, and do my laundry, then, clean my house. You didn't do my homework, you didn't study for your exam. It's because your mind, you have not yet built the muscle of bringing your mind back. And it's a muscle, just like physical exercise, right? Some days you're good, some days you're strong, but the more you show up and the more you do it, the stronger your body becomes, correct? And so another thing is, not only is your mind scattered, but then you're disconnected from your emotions. When you're not present, guess what you're going to miss? How you really feel. what you're really thinking and feeling about the situations in front of you, right? You're going to be disconnected from yourself. And this is part of a big factor why people do feel that disconnect from themselves. And that, maybe you feel like you're going through the motions day in and day out, but you just feel like you don't know what you're feeling. You don't know. You just feel like disconnected, it's like, I don't know, and this is due to partly because we're not present with ourselves. Remember, the present is a sacred space. It's the only space where we can connect with ourselves. So if you're always escaping from the moment right in front of you, you're really also escaping from what? You, right? Like I tell, one of the things that, like, think about whenever you have a moment to be present or quiet. I want you to, after this talk, I want you to pay attention to these things, like in your day, like when you get in your car, New York City, never mind. When you, when you have a moment to yourself, or when you get on, the path or the train, right? And you're just by yourself, think about, what's your first instinct? When you're sitting there and you're still, what's your first instinct? Take out your phone, do something, call somebody, put on something. I have to listen to something, right? How many of you can just stay still? Just say, this moment, me being present with this moment on its own is enough. And then I want you to ask yourself, what are you escaping from if it's not enough? What are you afraid to feel? Because a lot of times it's that either you yourself don't feel enough, right? You feel like, I don't want to sit with myself. Like, this is, you know what I mean? It's like, it's almost like, I'm not used to this. Like, just me, that's not enough, or just me and Allah, that's not enough. Or you're experiencing emotions that you've been escaping from, and silence makes those emotions come to the surface. But I'll tell you what, the more that you can build the muscle of leaning into that stillness and not having to resort to listening to something, to putting on music, to, constantly be talking to someone, to filling these spaces, the more peaceful you will become, the stronger you will become, because you're allowing yourself to just be still. You're not asking yourself of much. In fact, when you're escaping and you're asking yourself of a lot more than Allah asked you. He didn't ask you to fill every single silence with noise, right? He didn't ask you to fill every single moment you have with somebody else, right? The more we can practice just saying, you know what, me sitting here is enough. And one thing I always have my students do is, go out, like, cultivate this habit of going out and being in nature, in a spot where they can just practice this. They can sit and just be present with Allah's creation, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his creation, without feeling like they have to take out their phone or call somebody or let the time pass. The most powerful thing about these moments, when you have more of them, is you become so connected to this most powerful tool within you, which is your heart. And in doing that, you become more connected to your creator, the one who created this heart as a tool of connection to him. The more you're disconnected from being present, the more you resist to being present, the less you have access to this. The less you have access to this, the less you have access to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because you need this to walk towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You need this to go closer to him. You need this to connect to him. Right? And this is what leads people when they're making dua, when they're connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they are, that they're just like, it's lip service, as my teacher used to say, just going through the motions. You memorize some duas, you're saying them, you're just doing what you've been doing, and you miss out on this huge connection that you can have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I want you to think about it. How good does it feel when you sit with another human being and their heart, and someone you love, and their heart is connected to you, and your heart is connected to them, and you're listening to them, and you're present with them, and they're present with you? How good does that feel? Feels amazing, right? What do you walk away feeling in those moments? How would you describe that feeling? Let me see if the online viewers are answering. So not all the pressure is on you guys.
I would describe it as like a warm feeling.
A warm feeling. That's a good, yeah.
Like fulfillment.
Fulfillment. Absolutely. Yeah. Warmth, right? It's like, what is warmth? It's like comfort, right? It's fulfillment, nourishment, right? Your heart got something out of this. That's essentially what it is, right? My heart is walking away fuller. Not just my mind is walking away fuller. No, my heart is walking away fuller. That's a big difference. There's a big difference. A lot of us go to spaces, we walk away with fuller minds and not fuller hearts. Where I got some more information. Okay, I'm going to store it. But my heart still not as full. So there's a big difference in that. We want to walk away from our experiences, from our tests, from our interactions with fuller hearts and facilitate the means for other people to also walk away with fuller hearts. But now I want you then to imagine if you were doing that with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The reason I asked you this question is because if you can connect to that amazing feeling you have when you feel truly connected to another human being, imagine then the type of fulfillment, right? The type of warmth, the type of nourishment you will feel when you experience that connection with your creator. Imagine. It's an undescribable kind of nourishment. Because now you're not accessing a limited human being who doesn't have everything you need, right? No, now you're connecting, not just going through the motions with Allah. No, now you're actually connecting with the one who's the source of everything you need, with the one who has an infinite supply of everything you need. Big difference, right? So we want to start by it's Allah and ourselves, right? We want to start with cultivating first, we want to build this muscle of being present with this heart within us, this heart that was created to long for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that was created as the greatest means of connection to the world that Allah created for us. When there's a difference between being even in a beautiful place, right? And I'm sure you guys have experienced this. Have you guys ever been in a beautiful place and you can just acknowledge that it's beautiful, but you don't feel that you're experiencing beauty? That's the difference between the mind and the heart. The mind says, oh, that's beautiful. The heart is like, wow, I feel the beauty of this place. But that requires presence. That requires your ability to build this muscle of being still and present with what you see in front of you, with what you're experiencing. And again, it's about realizing that this moment has value for me. We as creatures, we as human beings, we only are more connected to things that we see have something we need. I always give this example of like two people who go to an interview for a job, right? One already has a backup position. They're good. Like if I don't get this job, it's not a big deal, right? And then the other person, they're like, no, I need this job. I need to pay the rent. My rent is due. I need to pay this job soon, right? Which one do you think is going to be more present in that interview? Who's going to really like zoom in, laser focus on what they're going through, on the interaction? Person who knows in their heart, I need this job. This applies to everything else. It applies to when you stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you know you need this prayer, you're more present. It's different than, okay, I need to check this off in front of Allah. No, now you're going to the prayer. I need this. I need this prayer. When we as human beings feel like we need something, oh, we're so present, right? We're so focused. We're not going to miss a beat, right? So that's really what it is. A lot of us are disconnected from our need for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for our connection to ourselves and our heart, but also for the present, this moment right here. And I want you to start even practicing this now. You're here in this class and you might find yourself thinking, what am I going to eat next? Or when am I going to go do this? And when am I going to call this person? Or what? Start building that muscle even now. Bring yourself back, right? Be like, no, there's no greater moment. There's no more sacred moment than now. This moment has what I need, and I'm here. So let me get what I need from it. And you know what's happening to a lot of people? They're missing what they lost from moments that have just passed, right? So like, for example, when they're at work, they're like, oh, when I get out of work, I'm going to do this and this and this. What usually happens when that happens? When people leave at work? Do they do all those things? How many times people say like, when I get out of work, I'm going to do this and this. And they spend their whole work day thinking like, okay, God, I wish I wasn't here. When I leave here, I'm going to do my laundry. I'm going to, clean my house. I'm going to make sure I'm going to finish all my homework, right? Like all these things. And then you leave work and you get there and you're like, I just want to relax, right? You know what that is? It's again, your mind and your heart and your being resisting you actually being present with work. You're telling yourself that the next moment has what you need. Work is the problem, right? That's the problem. Me being here is the problem. The present is the problem. So as long as if I could just get to that next moment, that's what's going to have what I need. But then what happens? Work piles up at work. Work piles up at home because you're always skipping to the next moment. I find that this is one of the lack of presence is one of the major reasons why people procrastinate, is because the moment of the here and now is not good enough. So that's what happens. Things pile up because the moment right in front of you is not good enough. It's like, oh, let me go to the next moment. Then you're at home and you're like, I'll do my laundry tomorrow. And then you're back again at work. And then it's like the same thing, right? So when we see that, no, I need this present moment because I need to be connected to what is right in front of me. There's no other moment that's more valuable than now. So what happens is your mind shifts and you start maximizing. You're at work, let me get as much done now. And who knows the value of now more than anyone? Does anyone guess? Can anyone take a guess? Who do you think knows the value of the here and now more than anyone? Oh, maybe my question is a little vague. Yes, of course, Alyssa, she's correct. Someone wrote babies and toddlers. I mean, they're just in the moment, right? Okay, someone said a person in poor health. You're close. A person who has no time. You know what they say? You want something done, ask a busy person. That's so true. Busy, I always remember there was a semester in college where I worked full time and I went to school in the evening. And I remember I only had like a couple of hours or 1 or 2 hours between my job and then going to my classes. And that was a semester I did the best in. My grades were the highest in that semester. And I always remember that as an example. I'm like, wow, I did more in this semester than I did in previous semesters, because that hour that I had in between my job and my evening classes, I was like laser focused, but I wasn't doing that in previous semesters. Right. And that's how I learned. I'm like, it's this perception that I have all the time in the world. That's what kills people. That's what gets people to procrastinate. Right. But when I knew that this hour mattered, this hour right in front of me is what matters and what I have, and I'm not guaranteed another hour and I need this hour. You see that where the need is, it's like, I need this. What happens is you roll up your sleeves. You're like, I'm in, you minimize distractions. But we don't need to be, there's he taught us to value 5 before 5, right? Your health before you get sick, your youth before you get old. But one of them is what? Your time before you become busy, right? So this goes back to, again, increasing this value we have towards being present, towards the presence. And it starts with the little moments. It starts with cultivating that in the little day-to-day moments. It's when you get on the train. Hold on 1 second. I lost my page. 1 second. Here we go. So it's like, when you are, when you're cooking for yourself breakfast, when you're making breakfast, when you're on a phone call with someone, it's very easy to think, that the next moment that my phone can take me away to something else, bring yourself back. You find yourself on the phone and, oh wait, you can't. If you find yourself in class and you're picking up your phone to do something, it's going to be uncomfortable. Build the muscle of saying, you know what, I'm going to put my phone away. I'm going to pay attention. I'm not going to tell myself, oh, I'm not going to pay attention now. I'll just really study later. How many people do that, right? You miss the lecture. You're like, I'll study later. I'll really connect to this later, but you don't want to connect to it now, right? If you maximize the moments you're given in front of you, like you really pay attention, you really keep bringing yourself back in the lecture, you're actually saving yourself time later. And you're like, okay, now you're just reviewing, as opposed to like spending double the time now studying everything that was already in the class for you. One of the things that a lack of presence does too is it creates a huge gap in our lives. And so this gap is, and partly because many of us are not present because we're not where we want to be. This is one of the reasons why people escape the present, because they look at their present, they think, this is not where I should be. This is not where I should be in life. This is not where, this present is not, I'm supposed to be there. That's what's supposed to be in my life, right? So what we say is that in psychology is that a gap is created, right? This gap between where we actually are, our present, and where we think we should be, which is what? Another time in the future, correct? And so a gap is created between where we are, the here and now, the present, the sacred space, and the future, a time and place that has not yet existed. So we're in this gap. And they say that depression falls into this gap. A lack of joy falls into this gap. Why do you think that is? Yeah, exactly. You and the person online just answered the same thing. Perfect. So she said also, because you're not getting enough nourishment for your heart. And you said that it's because your heart is disconnected, right? And that's really it. It's not that the grass is greener, right? The expression, the grass is greener on the other side. It's not that the grass is actually greener. It's that your heart is disconnected from the green grass right in front of you. The beauty that lies right in front of you. So you place yourself in this gap where you're like, I don't want to be connected to my present, and I'm not yet in the future. So you're in this place that's literally deprived of joy. That's like, you're like robbing yourself of joy, because in your actual present, there's nobody that has a present that Allah did not give them joy or blessings in it, right? Of course, there are challenges, but there are blessings in everybody's present, right? There's no present in someone's life that's completely 100% all tests, right? We know in the Quran, inna ma'al usri yusra, right? Verily, with hardship is ease. It's not after hardship. Okay, you either 100% in hardship and then you're in ease. No, is that pain can sit right next to ease, right? That hardship and tests and struggles can sit right next to our blessings. And that we can experience both and we can hold a space for both. And so when we're constantly in this mindset of, this is not where I should be, first of all, you're claiming that you know where you should be, right? Like you're claiming that your plan for yourself is also greater than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's plan for you. No, I shouldn't be here. This is not where I should be. You're doing what you're doing in that moment. And there's a difference between that and like, I appreciate my present, but I want to keep improving. I have ambition, right? There's a difference, right? No, I'm talking about the mindset of nothing here. This is not where I should be. I don't like anything about my present. I don't belong here kind of thing. I need to be somewhere else, right? That creates for you a lot of resistance because your mind has rigidly defined what success and what your happiness is and that's what happens, right? Is that you have said in a rigid way, happiness is this. My happiness equals this. And it does not belong here because I don't have that thing that equals that. So it belongs over there. So when you rigidly define your happiness and then you place it in another place and time, you're literally saying that nothing in my present equals that happiness. So I cannot feel joy until I have experienced this. You have placed a condition on your joy, on your happiness, on your peace. And I want you to think about this because this is a huge reason why a lot of people are unhappy. They have placed a rigid condition on their happiness. They have made their happiness rigidly conditional on a specific thing happening. It's almost like someone who like is punishing themselves, right? Like, I will not be happy. I vow, like weeks of unhappiness until I get this one thing, right? But who are you hurting in that moment, in those weeks, in those months? You're hurting yourself, right? And then as you're doing that, all these blessings are around you that you're like, nope, can't enjoy them because it doesn't equal the happiness that I have rigidly defined with my mind. And so when we do that, our mind creates a prison for our hearts. You know, it's like, no heart, you can't be happy, you can't enjoy, because it's going to be like someone wrote here, nothing is going it's like it has to go my way or the highway, right? And so one of the things we have to always do is assess our conditions, assess the rigidity we place on the shoulds and musts of our life. Because if we don't do that, if we don't loosen up our rigid expectations, we'll always find ourselves in this gap, missing all of the good things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts in front of us. And how many times people reach that place where they think, oh, this is what's going to make me happy. What usually happens when people reach that place? Is it Jannah? No. What happens, do you think? What are some things you see happen often when people finally reach that place that they think? Someone said, usually you're disappointed. And then you set another goal, right? It's an illusion. And I believe shaitan plays a big role in this, right? Shaitan's biggest task, I think, is to get people to not see the power of the here and now, to give you the promise of tomorrow, to keep you chasing. I always think of like somebody in the desert chasing a mirage, right? It's not a real destination. And you get there and your thirst is unquenched and you still continue chasing again. And it's not as satisfying because happiness is not a destination. Happiness is an emotion. It comes and goes just like sadness, just like irritation, annoyance. It's an emotion. And a lot of people make happiness, I mean, it's like programmed into us that it's something that you chase or you arrive at. It's even in our constitution, right? The pursuit of happiness, right? So, but in reality, from a psychological point of view, happiness is an emotion. You can feel happy in a day and sad in the same day, right? Emotions come and go. They're not destinations you arrive at. And sometimes when you do get that thing that you have associated with your happiness, guess what happens? Even when we get blessings in life, can't we get a blessing and still feel sadness? Absolutely. People go marry off their children and they're crying, right? They're like, oh, they're so happy. This is like what they waited for, right? My child's getting married. They're sad, right? So we've associated like emotions with specific things when actually situations, blessings, someone could be going through a struggle and they could have a smile on their face. We've like literally attached certain emotions to specifics, like all or nothing, right? This means happiness. This means sadness, and we only accept what feels good. But we know in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that you might dislike something that is what? Good for you. And you might like something which is bad for you. So part of this, what I'm sharing with you here goes back to presence, because our lack of presence creates this gap, but also our rigid expectations of where we should be also makes us not want to be present, because we think our present has nothing to offer us. And the sad part about this is that when people do this and they don't get themselves out of this rigid thinking, so much of the beauty of their life that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created right in front of them gets missed, right? And gets not utilized, not maximized. Like, for example, when Allah withholds something from you and you're sitting there and you're waiting for that thing, but you're missing out on how Allah's molding you through this time and how he's giving you, maybe he's withholding something, but he's giving you time. He's withholding this, but he's giving you an opportunity to do that, right? And you're just missing it because you're like, no, I don't have that one thing. Right? So as you can see, presence plays such a huge role in just the way that we even maximize our life. So Hafiz, he has a phrase says happiness is right in front of you, meaning it's wherever you give your attention to. And this we know, right? Like whatever you give your attention to grows. And I want you to think about this. This goes from our thoughts. This goes from, it applies to everything, right? You give attention to the negative, that negative is going to feel so much bigger in your eyes. You give attention to the positive, it's going to feel so much bigger. And this is why gratitude is one of the greatest ways that we can practice presence, because to be grateful, you actually have to what? Notice what is right in front of you. Can you be grateful about something in the future? No. Right. And so like you have to be in the moment and think about everything that you have and every blessing that Allah has given you and every beauty that you see around you and every beauty you're experiencing for you to actually be grateful. So a gratitude check daily, even, and we have this in our faith, right? After every prayer, we say Alhamdulillah 33 times, right? We say Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, right? But a lot of times when we do that, again, it's like lip service, right? Like Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, right? And then, but I want to encourage you that when you get to that part, really after every alhamdulillah, just think about something you're grateful for, something that exists in your life today, in here and now, that you're grateful for. So those 33 times, they're not just like your tongue just gets tired and you walk away. No, your heart actually gets activated. You walk away feeling more nourished. You walk away feeling more connected to the blessings right in front of you. So when you can build this muscle presence, there are many benefits. One, less comparison, right? When you're present with your grass, and you're present with the fact that no, whatever Allah has given me is already, like, what I have in front of me has its beauty. Whatever, you acknowledge what is in front of you. You're comparing yourself less to other people because you actually acknowledge that you're too busy connecting to the beauty, that the blessings Allah has already given you, right? And so the grass is not greener on the other side. You're just not present with your own grass. And when you are present with your own grass, you don't have time to compare yourself. You know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given everybody their share of blessings and challenges. So you tell yourself, you know what? I'm just connected to mine, to my lot, right? To whatever Allah has allotted for me. And that itself takes your energy. When people who are really present and are grateful, they don't have time to compare themselves to other people because they understand, I have my own set of challenges. I have my own set of blessings. You gain more from listening. Another benefit is that you gain more from listening and knowledge you acquire. A lot of times, because we're not present, we're just gathering information, but we're not actually connecting to that knowledge. Right? We're just like, oh, I went to this class, I listened to this lecture, I did this, but it's like your brain is like, it's getting full, but your heart is not getting fuller because the missing factor here is presence. So the great benefit of being present, one of them is that you gain more from listening to others. You gain actual growth from that, right? You find yourself being changed by these interactions that you're putting yourself in, by these conversations that you're in. When you are in circles, one of the biggest things that I hear nowadays is people are socializing, but they don't feel connection. They're talking, they don't feel like people are listening. They're in circle, they walk away, they're like, okay, yeah, I socialized, but I don't feel like I got anything out of that gathering. It's because the lack of presence is increasing. People are not present with their own heart, yet alone the heart that walks into a room, right? So I hope you're seeing how the disconnect, the lack of presence in your own life and the disconnect from your own heart impacts also other parts that walk into your space. If you don't see your own heart, you think you're going to make another heart feel seen? No. And this is why this work is so important, because the more that you can be connected to your own heart, the more that you can be connected to yourself, the more you can be connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah softens your heart and it allows you to be more connected to the hearts of others. You don't just view people as a number, you view hearts of people walking into your space, and you want to make sure that just as you value connection, you want to put in the effort to connect with that heart that came into your space. More contentment and gratitude, which leads to more abundance, right? The more present we are, the more grateful we are, the more abundant our life is. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, Ashkuruni azidannakum, right? Be grateful to me, I increase you. And this is a concept that's talked about now, even in just not just in the Muslim world, right? Like, the concept of be grateful, you invite what? Abundance into your life. It's like a popular concept that people are adopting now, right? It's like I practice daily, like people practice daily gratitude checks, right? So then they say, when I do that, I invite more abundance. My life becomes more abundant. This is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us in the Quran, that when you are grateful, it's related to what? Him increasing you. And this is a great way to a great reaction to have when you're afraid of losing a blessing. That when you're afraid that oh my God, Allah blessed me with something. What if I lose it? Show gratitude. Because Allah says, be grateful to me, I will increase you. So channel that fear into no, I'm so grateful for this. Alhamdulillah. Thank you, Allah, for giving me this. Another benefit is that you strive more towards your potential. The more present you are, the more present you're going to be with your strengths. You're going to be more present with what Allah has given you, right? Instead of what Allah has given so-and-so, and what has Allah given me that I can utilize? Allah subhanahu, we know from hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says that Allah loves to see the effects of his blessings upon his servant. And we think about this in terms of outward blessings, like Allah has given me a car, or, things that are outwardly. No, we all have inner blessings, right? Your personality is not like her personality. Your strengths are different than her strengths. Your weaknesses are different, right? So everybody has their share. But if you're disconnected from your own strengths, from what Allah has given you uniquely in your personality and your skills and your strengths, how can you utilize them? But that requires presence. And of course, the quality of our relationships improve. And so I just want to go over a few ways to become more present. One is, setting intentions. Intentions are a great way for you to be present with what you're about to do. And again, this is something that we know the benefit of outside of even, Islam, is that being intentional is a common, psychological tool now that's being talked about, right, in the self-help world, of intentional living, being intentional. What is one of the most foundational hadiths we're taught in our faith? Verily, actions are by your intentions. That there's this emphasis that the heart behind the action is the most important thing, not the outcome of the action. And so when you are intentional, guess what you have to do? You have to be present, because you have to pause and you have to be still and you have to connect to yourself and be in the here and now and say, why am I doing this? What am I doing this for? Right? And so practice intentions. There's for the littlest to biggest things. You're going to see a friend, set your intentions, figure out what your intentions are. You're going to do something good for someone, set your intention. Set your intentions for the day. How do you want to live that day? Secondly, connecting to the hereafter and the temporary of our existence. This is huge for presence. One of the things that, and I think I mentioned this in a previous talk, but for those who weren't here, one of the things that we often miss is the psychological power of connecting to the akhirah. When you're connected to the fact that you're not guaranteed tomorrow, that that this is not your permanent station in life, right? And for the life of your soul, your maximization of the here and now becomes much greater. And we see this evident in the example of the companions, right? Where the Sahaba lived their day as if they would not reach the evening, and they lived their evening as if they would not reach the day. You know what that does? You maximize whatever is in front of you, but you're also more grateful for what is in front of you. You start filtering out what isn't important, and you don't delay doing what you need. You stop procrastinating. When you are connected to the fact that everything in this world has meaning for you in another world, when you're connected to the fact that you're not guaranteed tomorrow, when you're connected to the fact that Allah is seeing you and He's present with you, everything you do has value. And that's that sharp, really basira, right? That vision that the companions had, is that, wow, this is what I have, the here and now. This is my moment. This is my moment. Not the next moment. No, this is my moment to do what I can. What can I do? to increase, to not delay what I need to do to tomorrow. And so a lot of us are disconnected from that reality. We're disconnected from our meeting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're disconnected from the akhirah. We're disconnected from the fact that we're not guaranteed tomorrow, right? We've learned to look at that in a very negative way. And I find that now, the way it's supposed to be is that when you're connected to that, it actually makes you feel more at peace. It actually makes you feel awakened. It actually makes you want to maximize your life. It filters out a lot of noise. But now the way that we're being programmed in our society is to look at that as that takes me away from my life. That's going to ruin my happiness. But I'll tell you, from a psychological point of view, it's the opposite. Existential psychology says that people's anxiety actually increase when they're disconnected from the reality that their life is temporary. And they give examples of this, of people who get the news that they're going to die, like a chronic, a deadly illness or something, right? What happens to those people? They say that what usually happens is they get such a clear vision of their life. They start they're like, what have I been doing? How have I been living? What have I been like busying myself with that does not serve me? So they start filtering out the noise. I don't need this. No, I don't need this. I can't believe I've been wasting my time with this. I can't believe I've been, not doing this. I can't believe I'm not doing more of this, right? So what actually happens is the opposite. But we don't need to get a chronic illness to realize that our tomorrow is not guaranteed. Allah gives us examples constantly of other people, right, who did not make it, even in Ramadan. While we were entering Ramadan, a lot of people did not make it into Ramadan, right? And while we were living in Ramadan, a lot of people did not make it to the end of Ramadan. And so we have these reminders, but again, because we're not present with them, we're just desensitized. We're like, oh, that's happening, but the reality is that, we're depriving ourselves. And trust me, when you start to feel those days where you're like, I'm so connected to the present, you're going to feel the sense of like, I wish I was living like this all the time. Those days when you're so connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where you're so connected to the fact that you're not guaranteed tomorrow, your day becomes sweeter. Your day becomes more peaceful. Your day becomes you're more present. You're not taken in a million different directions. You actually filter out what is not in your control. You're like, oh, Allah's not going to ask me about that. Allah has given us this guideline, right? Of like that He does not hold us into account for things that are not in our power. And actually what happens is when we're disconnected from the akhirah, when we're disconnected from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we're disconnected from the reality that exists, well, we become chasing so many things that actually were not in our control. And Allah's not going to ask us about. But the things that Allah will ask us about, we've been neglecting. So what happens is when you do the opposite, it flips. You start filtering out, I'm not responsible for what that person said. I'm not responsible for that person's reaction. I'm not responsible for what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not responsible for the outcome of this action, right? You're like, did I pray on time? Did I do my dhikr? Did I complete, the tasks in front of me today that Allah has put within my responsibility? Life becomes simpler. Another great way to, become more present is to practice muraqabah, right? Muraqabah is the act of knowing, is having this, it's like mindfulness on the 10th degree, right? It's like knowing that while you're witnessing, you're being present and you're witnessing the reality that exists within you and outside of you, you're also aware that Allah is watchful over you. Because it comes from the name of Allah Ar-Raqib, right? Which is the watchful. And so this comes from being connected to, like, as you're doing things, the more connected we are that Allah is watching us, the more present you become, right? And it's interesting because people how do I say this? Like when people are at traffic lights, right? And they don't pass the traffic light because they know what? There's a camera, right? People become aware when they feel like someone's watching them. That's a psychological reality. People's behaviors change when they feel like someone's watching them. Now we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with us. He's a Sami' al-Basir, right? He's the all-hearing, the all-seeing. He doesn't miss anything we do. The more connected you are to that, the more you will be present with what's right in front of you, because you're like, Allah sees this. Allah's with me. Not just in the sense of like, oh, I don't want to do anything wrong, but no, but also in the sense of, well, that benefits you, because when you don't do something that Allah doesn't like, you're benefiting yourself, because you're not doing something that doesn't serve you. Right? But also from the opposite end, you're doing you're present with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that action becomes sweeter. You're not alone, right? You know that it matters. You know that the action in front of you matters, that the task at hand matters, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards you for that action. Another thing that we mentioned is, dhikr, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, praising Allah, subhanallah, gratitude, alhamdulillah, showing that gratitude. And then through redirection, reminding ourselves that our nourishment and what we need is nowhere but the here and now. And then I will stop here and take questions, inshallah, from both here on Zoom. I'll be checking, and then of course from you guys. Yeah, no, I really appreciate your question. And just for those who didn't hear her online, she's asking about, how do we deal with being in environments and with family members and loved ones who are constantly hastening to the next moment? Like she was mentioning, she finished her school and it's like, what, the next step, so that's a really important thing, because I don't think it's just within our community. I think society itself is training us and programming us to be in the next moment, right? It's like that. It's part of the consumer culture too. It's like, oh, you need this, you just, what you have is not enough, right? And everything about your present is not enough. So, but I understand that that's a big thing. And I'll hear people all the time, they'll say like, I was doing fine, I was enjoying my life and everything. And then, my parent came and said, well, when are you gonna do this? Or and this happens to people all the time, right? They'll have finished an accomplishment or finished a chapter in their life. And then someone's asking them, well, there's a saying like, I think there's like an Arab joke where they say like you finish school and they're asking you when you're going to get married. After you get married, you get married and then they ask you when you're going to have kids. When you have the first kid, they ask you when you're going to get a second kid. So it's a common struggle. And I appreciate that you said at the end that you feel like you have to kind of be conscious of working on yourself. But I do want to acknowledge that like it's natural to be affected by those statements, because especially when you're trying to be present and it's natural to be irritated by that, but it's how you react to that irritation that matters. It's how you react to that annoyance, right? It's building this assurance within yourself that I know that when you know something in your heart, you're less shaken by other people's voices. It doesn't mean that it's not going to irritate you. And that's part of life, right? That people say these things and you're like, okay, you take a pause and you're like, okay, that's not how I choose to view it, and to disconnect from that having a value for you, right? But the more you actually build this muscle of my present is valuable, and I want to make sure that I'm present, I'm maximizing every chapter in my life, because that's what's happening for a lot of people. They're getting to that. I asked this earlier, right? What happens when you finally get to that stage that you define as happiness? What happens? You feel like, okay, what's the next goal? Right? And so people value the destination more than the journey. And what we want to do is we want to value both, right? We want to value, okay, I have a clear vision of where I want to be, but this chapter is so beautiful and is so important. And the path to getting there is important, right? And it has so much more to offer me than the actual destination. But the journey itself to you becoming a doctor, to wherever your goals are, right? That journey itself has so much to offer the individual. And part of it is being content with your life, with your chapter, with where you're at. When you're content, and when you're working so hard to really cultivate that inner contentment, it becomes harder for people to take you out of that. But when you are not content with your chapter, with your journey, with your path, the second somebody says, oh, when is this, the reaction is going to be far greater. It's not going to just be, oh, an irritation, annoyance. It's going to throw your whole day off, right? It's going to be like, oh my God, why did they say that? I was doing fine. Now I'm reminded of what I don't have. And right. It's going to be, but so you'll notice, that's how you'll notice you're growing, that your reaction to these things are not going to throw you off so much. But at the end of the day, we don't negate our human experience, right? We don't say, oh, I'm going to be just, a woman of steel. Nothing is going to get through to me. It's not going to, people's comments can bother you, especially if it's close people, right? Like your loved ones, if there's just this thing of like, it might bother you that they think that you're not where you need to be, right? Or things like that. But it's part of doing this work is that you determine what your values are. You determine what is important to you, and you determine what you're going to be content with. And the more that you are clear on what those values are, right? And where you get your worth from, the less people are going to be able to shake you. But if you get your worth from people's approval of you, whether it's family or not, if you get your worth from societal expectations of you, if you get your worth from people telling you where you should be and you fulfilling them, then of course, they've just attacked your worth. In that moment, it's not just a statement anymore. They've literally just attacked your sense of worth. So part of this is really assessing, where have we placed our worth? And am I really content with the chapter in front of me? Am I really enjoying this chapter in front of me? And the more we can do that, the less these voices of other people have an impact. I hope that helps or makes sense.
If you would like to listen to more, please donate to www.icnyu.org/donate. For more of our virtual programs, go to www.icnyu.org/classes. If you have any questions, email us at info@icnyu.org.